Ladies and gentlemen, Mollusk here. It's been a while. Work has just been kicking my ass lately, but I did manage to get a game against one of my friends. It's actually his first game and I'm just showing him the ropes, expanding that player base one person at a time. I'm still experimenting with the best way to introduce someone to this game, and this report's really going to showcase my current thinking. I start by giving a super brief background to the setting of Malifaux, and explain that the game is about scoring points by completing missions. I mention what crews and soulstones are, and then walk them through the use of models by explaining that the game works like chess in that it's a you go, I go, and that's called an activation. I mention that there are AP points, action points, that each model has to do stuff with, and I give an example of model moving, and then another model charging, which allows me to quickly demonstrate a duel, explaining how the card numbers and stats work, and drawing their attention to the weak, moderate, and severe mechanism. I mention the suits but don't expand on them, and basically say, right, let's have a light-hearted game, and we'll pick up the rest as we go. So let's get into this. So we've got a 25 soulstone game, led by henchmen, no upgrades. And I find this game size allows me to get in some of the more interesting models. Everyone's usually got a lot of soulstones, but we can keep the model count down. I designed my opponent's crew beforehand, just to be fairly simple and hard-hitting without too many synergy-based rules. And then I take some models I find it fun to play with. I should also mention I run the game with a strategy and only one scheme apiece. Again, just trying to keep things simple. So we've set up the terrain, the houses are impassable as normal, this is forest. These are severe terrain, rock features, and that's about it. Keep it light. I've got Barbarous, Mr. Graves, Mr. Tannen, and Tuco. Jimu has got Railworker, 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 Kang, and the Guild Pathfinder who's hidden behind that tree. Both have chosen to deploy from the shadows right by the, turf marker. 10 Thunders go first, I think. The Pathfinder summons a trap and shoots ineffectively at Tuco. Tuco moves and shoots ineffectively at the Pathfinder. Good start. By the end of turn 1, the rail crew have formed a nice picket line, and I'm spreading out my guys a little bit more than I need to. It's not quite breaking up their synergies, but it's making it easier for that to be disrupted. And it looks like next turn could get a bit messy. Remember to take a photo of my hand this turn, and just look at that. Probably the best hand I've ever drawn. In a game I'd really rather not win. Sigh. 10 Thunders get the first turn, and Kang barrels into Mr. Graves, and they start duking it out. Tuco skedaddles for the rock to go plant some evidence. The Pathfinder brings out another trap, and Mr. Tannen narrowly escapes, being slowed by it. One of the rail workers charged Barbarous and missed his attack. Barbarous punched him in the face and knocked him back to where he is, and then charged after him. But these rail workers are pretty sturdy, and so they only did a couple of damage. Only took a couple of damage even. I think this one tried to walk away, but Barbarous stopped him, and he attacked Barbarous, but Barbie was having none of it, and the Neverborn's Dark Knight holds the two workers in place. There have been some jokers flying around, so the Mr. Graves, Mr. Kang combat has been pretty tense, and they've both taken flesh wounds at this point. However, at the end of this turn, the 10 Thunders have two models within range of the turf marker, and the Neverborn have none, so 1 point to Kang and his posse. Turn 3, always my favourite turn. I'm holding on to my good cards. Oh, and it looks like I soulstone to demonstrate that mechanic, and we both do that every turn from now on. I go first, and Tuco jumps up onto the rock and drops his plant evidence marker. On the other side of the trees, my opponent has worked out that Mr. Tannen and Barbarous shouldn't be allowed to tag team together, and the Pathfinder summons another trap and shoots at Mr. Tannen for nothing, I think, and then both rail workers attack Mr. Tannen, blasting through the gauntlet of willpower checks, and they bring him down. Curses. Looks like Kang has moved round Mr. Graves to be out of black blood range and closer to the turf marker, and by this point he's brought Mr. Graves down to his last wound. But Mr. Graves retaliates, and thanks to a black joker from Kang, he delivers a crushing strike for severe damage, and Kang is now on his last wound. And then I believe for my last attack, I move round here to be in black blood range and closer to the turf marker as well. You know, let's just draw out the suspense. Turn 4. So I'm in a bit of trouble now. I've got one scheme marker down, no points so far for the turf marker. He's been scoring every turn and he's got his protect territory stuff down. And I don't think I've got enough to clear him out. I think a rail worker charges and smacks Mr. Graves down, who then bleeds on Kang, but Kang has one last soul stone, which he uses to save himself. But Tuco quite rudely hopped down from his rock and shot Kang in his crap lousy face. I've been trying to get a blast to go off all game and I just can't manage it. But the mighty shoveler is finally down. Pathfinder summoned 2 more traps in an effort to slow Barbarous, but there's no chance of that. Barbarous bull rushes out with this guy. Nearly... oh no, that's right, I Black Joker the damage. But as far as I'm aware, the push still happens because it's not a trigger, it's just part of the thing. And the Black Joker's just no damage. And then I nimble away out of engagement to get back towards the turf marker. The cowardly rail worker runs away over here, and the rail workers are just dropping markers and holding the centre, and preparing to hold out in the last turn. So we are going into turn 5, and yeah, pretty much nothing happens. The game's over at this point. Barbarous runs in to cause some fun. He takes this one, or they're both down on the last wound, whatever. I've sat him so that if the trap attacks him, or if anything else attacks him, he'll bleed and kill them both. But my opponent was canny enough to see that happening, even without me telling him. So he just left me to it. And actually my first move of the game was to, first move of the turn was to move Tuco to go and get my second plant evidence marker before anybody else could foil my plans with their engagement ranges. And that, my friends, is the end of the game. Gmu scored a full 7 points, 4 points for the strategy turf war, and 3 points for having protect territory declared. I scored 1 point for turf war in this final turn, and then 3 points for plant evidence, making this a solid win for the 10 Thunders, and actually a really decent showing for my friend's first game. He picked it up really quickly, and I look forward to playing a more expanded version of him in the future. Hope you got something worthwhile out of it too. Take care.